What do you find in your experience are the biggest underlying reasons that people get so anxious around texting and dating to begin with?
It is so incorrectly portrayed on the internet. You know, if I see one more fucking video of like, if a guy doesn't text you every day, it's because he doesn't like you. That's it. He doesn't like you. You could be dead on the street. He doesn't care about you. What I see is black and white thinking. I see a lot of that when it comes to texting. It's like, it's either good or it's bad. It's this or it's this. Yeah. And what it really is like, this has nothing to do with the text. You have known this person for all of 2 hours of your life. You may have gone out for one drink. What it is, it's like that intense fear of abandonment, that fear of rejection. Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Sabrina, so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining me. And we were sort of talking just a little bit before we got started here about what got you into this whole path to begin with. I can't believe your podcast started like a year and a half ago. It's amazing. Tell our listeners just a little bit about you and what brought you down this path in the first place.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for having me. Congratulations on the podcast. It's so exciting. So for me, my name is Sabrina Zohar. I'm a dating coach and host of Do the Work podcast. And my journey started very similarly, I think, to a lot of people were like, I hit rock bottom. Like I did not know what I was doing. I was feeling very lost in 2016, 2017. My mom went to the doctor with a headache. They found 6 brain aneurysms that corroded the top half of her head and pretty much gave her like no chance of survival. And she did this crazy 180 and really just her mindset was strong and she didn't believe that she was going to be gone. And they created a coil that worked. And the day after her successful surgery, I started my company Software. And so I had a clothing company and I had been doing that. And, you know, at that time, this was when I'd married my father. So I was with the narcissistic, very verbally abusive human being. And in that moment is like no, I lied. It wasn't in that moment. I'm not even going to try to pretend that I was like, that was the moment I knew. No, I knew I had issues. I just genuinely believed I was on an island and that was everybody else and not me. And that nobody understood me and that everybody was just really mean to me and like they just didn't get it. And so I really dove into therapy after when my ex left me. It wasn't even, I wish I could say I was a strong, independent woman that left. Like, nah, he walked out on me and I turned into a shell of a human. And I completely lost myself and my mom had to come and pick up the pieces. Thank God she did, because I don't know where I'd be if she didn't. And after he lived with me for 3 months when he got back from his trip and I kicked him out and I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this ever again. Like, I'm not going to be used and I'm not going to be treated like this. And that's when I started diving into therapy. And then it took me 6 years from there to start to really understand like, oh, I have severe anxiety. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. I had a narcissistic father and a people-pleasing mother. I have all of us have ADHD. So my siblings were Tasmanian devils running around and bouncing off the walls. And then you're trying to vouch for trying to get any attention in the household. And 6 years after that breakup was really lonely. I had a lot of rock bottoms. COVID was tough. And I really just dedicated myself to like understanding myself and learning myself and understanding where all of this comes from. And that's kind of what led me to then moving to LA to pursue my company, left in COVID, 2021, and just was doing the same thing, thinking that I was going to get a different result. I won't even say insanity. I'll just say the brain doing what it does and show myself a little compassion. And then it was in 2022, I was supposed to be on Shark Tank. I spent 6 months prepping and planning and doing, and this was it. This was going to be my thing. And at this point, I had already been doing tons of podcasts and panels and things like that and taking clients for entrepreneurship because I started my company from nothing and scaled it to a lot of people were coming to me. And what I realized was relationships were very similar than work. You know, a lot of those parallels of insecurities and scarcity mindset and fear. And I was sent home from Shark Tank after 12 hours on set of sitting and waiting and I'm ready and you're next and this is it. And they said, I'm sorry, we can't fit you on today. And I hit rock bottom. I went home and I went mental and I was just like, fuck this. I was like, let me try posting on TikTok. And I posted on TikTok and I said, well, I'll give it a go. And then a month later, my dog passed away and I was just a shell of a human. And I broke up with the guy that I was seeing at the time. And I was like, I was dating an avoidant. And I was like, I don't need all of this. Like, just because you text me every day, but where were you when my dog died? And it all, like, kind of the stars aligned for me. And I started to really dive it even further into like what's happening with me.
Wow.
And made a change, moved to San Diego, met my partner, started my business even further, started my podcast, and just allowed everything to crumble so that I could rebuild it in a way that felt more authentic to me.
Good for you. Yeah, I really believe that. I'm a firm believer when we go through hard times, sometimes it's because we're actually just really out of alignment. And I think we tend to have, I'm curious what you think about this before we even dive into the topic, but I feel like we have such a polarized relationship to pain as a society, where we think of pain as being this like exclusively terrible thing. And it's not to say that pain is fun or it's nice or it's easy, but pain sometimes brings the most powerful lessons. And I feel like your story is such a testament to that already, just seeing how everything crumbled in a sense, but like then that got you more into alignment with what you're supposed to be doing and something that is much healthier for you in terms of a relationship. Like it looks like it really came full circle. I've had that experience. I've seen this countless times. And I think sometimes pain serves, even though it's really hard.
100%. Think about it. How would we feel pleasure if we don't know how the other side feels, right? Like if we had every day, you had good, you get arrogant, you get entitled, you start to not appreciate it, versus like when, it's the same as like I ate shit for years. Like I was paycheck to paycheck was an understatement. I was living off the government because I couldn't even afford to pay my rent. My tiny 1 bedroom I had in New York, that was like $1,500 a month. That was nothing. I still couldn't even afford that. And I was working full time, and I know what it feels like to have nothing. So now when you have something, you're appreciative, but also, even what we were talking about prior, like I got this massive scare with my podcast and the name. And yeah, of course I got scared. But what I looked at is in that moment, I was like, hey, rebirth. This is an opportunity. Yeah. It's the same as like a breakup. Sure. Is there a shock? Absolutely. Like I think we have this really unrealistic expectation, especially in dating and in life, that like when a painful experience happens, we can't find a positive. It only has to be the negative, right? So it's like either or. So if I say, it's okay, use this as a means to like get yourself up and keep walking, then people will say, but I'm sad and I feel all that. It's like, we can hold two conflicting thoughts. You can feel an intense amount of pain and hurt, and that you could walk away while you're also crying doing so. But I try to look at it as like, once the shock wears off and you're just like, okay, then I remember who the fuck I am, and I remember what I am and how I got to this point in life. And I look at all of the adversity to me as an opportunity for growth. And I think we're doing ourselves a grave disservice if we don't see it that way.
I love that. That's beautifully said. That was powerful. So let's talk about dating. And we wanted to go down the topic of texting and dating. But I wanted to ask you, after you just shared a little bit about like your upbringing and so many of those different things, what do you find when people are sitting there and they are stressed when they're trying to get a text or waiting for a text back? What do you find in your experience are the biggest underlying reasons that people get so anxious around texting and dating to begin with?
Oh, I love this topic. I love it because it is so incorrectly portrayed on the internet. If I see one more fucking video of like, if a guy doesn't text you every day, it's because he doesn't like you. That's it. He doesn't like you. You could be dead on the street. He doesn't care about you. And what I find is it's like, okay, so what I see is black and white thinking. I see a lot of that when it comes to texting. It's like, it's either good or it's bad. It's this or it's this. Yeah. And what it really is like, this has nothing to do with the text. You have known this person for all of 2 hours of your life. You may have gone out for one drink. What it is, it's like that intense fear of abandonment, that fear of rejection, of like, we also have to think even like, let's even start back at the beginning, the addiction loop. Right? Like we have to think that our brains and our bodies were not bred for technology. Like we are still bred for 50 people and hunter-gatherers to be out in the middle of nowhere. So imagine the life that we're living has happened. It's coming at us so much quicker than our body and our nervous system can really handle. And what I see more often than not is like, we get that it starts in the wave of like dysregulation. That's really the place that it starts, because if I'm feeling secure and I'm feeling safe in my environment, someone texting me or not isn't going to set off my entire day. But if I feel like that text is a tiger, then what ends up happening is I've now essentially, my brain has put this person on a pedestal and or has told my brain, I'm only safe if I have this person. I'm only safe if I have them. And so now our brain starts to have the addiction loop. When do we get dopamine? It's such a common misconception, and I'm sure you know, that people think dopamine is that it comes every time I get a text. No. Dopamine is a reward drug. Dopamine comes in unpredictability. That's why it's so sexy. When are they going to text me next? When's it going to happen? Your brain is releasing dopamine. What it's also doing is your cortisol is spiking. And when your cortisol rises to that level, it's depleting all other neurotransmitters. So off the bat, we know that your brain is going through some chemical nonsense. It's going through the oxytocin, that connection that when you have, maybe you kiss them or maybe something happens and you're releasing all those love drugs. Maybe you slept with them, who knows? But usually more often than not, it's more about when I hear anybody talking about the text, when I'll say, well, what's the issue, right? Very rarely is it, I really liked that person and I'd love to see them again. Okay, then text them and make a plan. But when we get the like, well, I haven't heard from him today, it's usually, what, am I not good enough? What, do they not like me? Did they forget about me? Did they choose somebody else? So it's usually about the other person. Then we go back to, oh, it's just because you didn't get chosen.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like there's these underlying core wounds. You said that so well. We have these core wounds that we project onto the situation, right? It's not just the text, it's the meaning we're giving to the text, the abandonment or not chosen or unwanted. And there's a study done, it was so interesting, where they took a whole bunch of gamblers and they were trying to study like the dopamine cortisol reactions and what people were actually getting addicted to. And they found in blood samples of gamblers, that they actually had more of a dopamine spike when they thought about gambling rather than when they were actually gambling itself, which is so interesting to me because you see that in people's response to texting, like they're thinking about it, they're waiting for it, and you hear that all unfolding. So I want to go back to what you said earlier. You said, there's this dynamic of basically intermittent reinforcement that is part of it, but you also said there's black and white thinking. So for somebody who's like, okay, let's say they hear themselves in that and they're going, I am black and white thinking about text. It is kind of all or nothing. What advice do you have for somebody in that position? Like, where's that middle ground of portraying to themselves even like the healthy amount of texting to expect, to want? Like, what sort of information do you have for people there?
I think for me, like I was a black and white thinker. I was always, it's good or it's bad. And it's a cognitive distortion. Like it's a protective mechanism. It's not there's anything wrong with any of us. Our brain is trying to keep us safe. And it's like, okay, so if I know that, for me, what I always try to do is I'm like, can we challenge this thought for just a second? What facts do I have to back up that they didn't text me because they don't like me? Okay. Well, I don't have that. I don't have any. DBT was one of my favorite therapy practices because I loved dialectic behavioral therapy, right? I always fuck that up. But I loved, oh yes, I love challenging my thoughts. I love trying to say, okay, what are contrary thoughts here, right? Can I add in? To me, what I see it as black and white, healing is adding gray. Healing is taking those paint strokes and being able to say, even compassion of, okay, well, let me think about it. I know that person works 17 hours in I don't know, 16-hour days, right? Like I have one of my clients, she literally works like 14 or 15-hour days. And I understand that in that time, maybe that person really can't text me right now. And could there be another reason besides for the fact that this person doesn't like me? Then where I'd start to ask is like, okay, I want you to ask a few more questions. Where do you feel the sensations in your body when you start to come up with those narratives, right? They don't like me. I'm not good enough. Or I had one person write, well, surely, they just don't care about me if they don't text me every day. And I said, okay, when do you say things like that? Where do you feel that? Well, I get a little tickle in my chest. Okay. How old do you feel when you say things like that? Because for me, is this coming from the grown-ass adult that's regulated, that is seeing things like an adult? Or is this coming from a little girl or boy? Well, if dad loved me, he would do this. Right? We really have to start getting curious of like, what's under the hood? Like are we being cognizant and adult when we say to stop to think, if you had a child and your kid came to you and said, I don't think this boy likes me, he didn't text me, would you go, yeah, you're right, that guy doesn't give a shit about you, he could care less about you? Or would you stop and go, wait a minute, just because he didn't text you, he doesn't like you? Well, where'd you get that from? Right? And I think it's about, the one word I have is like, get curious. Start to get curious of like, well, so is that how you talk to your friends? You would tell your friend, you're right, that guy can't stand you, he doesn't like you at all because he didn't text you. No, I don't think that that's necessarily how you talk to your friend. You talk to your friend and go, whoa, dude, what are you talking about? You guys had a great date. Of course he likes you. Come on, don't be silly. That's just insecurity. But yet we can't seem to do that for ourselves.
Okay, so I love this. So we're going to break it down just for a moment. So because you're saying so many amazing things, and one of the big like components of this podcast that we're really trying to do is give people like these very tangible, actionable steps to walk away with. So I'm just going to summarize to anybody listening sort of what you went into. So first thing is like, don't think from black and white thinking. Don't go all or nothing. And the second thing is like, get curious about why it's so triggering to you. What core wound or what's sort of sitting there beneath the hood that maybe something you're coming back to from a long time ago, maybe even from childhood. And it's interesting because even what you said, like it's a form of arrested development when we feel these childlike emotions and sensations, and you can tap into them by tuning into what's going on in your body, in your nervous system. And often there's stored emotion there from previous experiences in the past. So I love that. Now, what do you say to somebody who's going, well, what about standards? Like I know, for example, for myself, I used to take clients through this back in the day when I ran my practice, and I would get people to sit down and ask themselves, like, what's an actual reasonable expectation in terms of texting? Because a lot of times, to your point, right, we see people be like, they didn't text me back for an hour. And it would be like, well, you've been dating them for 2 weeks. What do you actually think? Do you think somebody should be on call every hour for a text? Or also to your point, like, is this person even a texter? I know for me, like I like phone calls. I'm not a really big text message person. And sometimes there's those differences, right? But I would get people to say, okay, this is the actual reasonable expectation or standard to have versus my cognitive distortion of where I think it's at. But where do you put that in there? Like if somebody doesn't get a text for 3 or 4 days and they're 6 months into dating and it's more serious, like where do you draw that line generally?
I think for me, it's such a great question, and it's such a good thing like to talk about, because I think what we're doing is we're exemplifying that it's not black and white, that there is so much gray and so much nuance in these conversations. Because sure, we could go, oh, well, he doesn't like you. But instead, it's like, okay, so very big difference between, because I get this all the time, like, well, if you're not going to start like that in the beginning, and it's like, I'm sorry, so it just should be 100. Everything is just owed to you off the bat. We're not going to grow into anything. So my partner and I have been the same the entirety of our relationship, right? You and your husband, you didn't have stages, because what I see is a lot of people want relationship stuff before they're in a relationship. Yeah. So it's like, okay, let me ask you a question. Like you're hyper-focused. And it's like half the time I'll be like, let's put the shoe on the other foot, right? You dated a guy last week that you weren't that into. You said you wasn't a connection. Could you imagine if he came to you and said, what, am I not good enough that you didn't answer me? And you go, what are you talking about? God, not good enough. I was with my mother. What are you talking? I'm sorry, because what it also is like, it's also disrespectful towards other people, because then what I hear is like, oh, so you want everyone to act how you would, right? Well, I would do this. Okay, but are you dating yourself? Because if you are, that's going to get a little boring. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of those things that we have to look at. What else is going on? Texting is a byproduct of a deeper issue. So more than not, like I had one of my clients and she was dating this guy for like 6 months, but for like 3 of it, he wasn't here. Like they had met online and then he left, and then he came back. And every day she would say, well, he didn't text me today, and he didn't text me today, and he didn't text me today. And I finally one day stopped and I said, what is it that you need in this moment right now? And she just stopped and she was like, I really would like connection. I said, that's what's I said, that's what's missing here. You want the connection. I said, what does that text signify to you? She said, well, I don't feel like a priority to him. And I said, now that's the fucking issue. It's not about the text. It's not about, well, but he didn't text me today. It's about the fact, well, hey, I don't feel like I'm a priority to you. I don't feel like you just, okay, when you've been dating someone for 7, 8 months, sure, I think you have something. You've had 2 dates with this person and you go and say, I'm not a priority. Their answer will hopefully be, correct, you're not, because you haven't earned a place in my life. I always like to look at it as this. Let's reframe. If you're out there dating, you are the founder of your company hiring for the CEO. Are you going to give that CEO position to somebody after the first time you meet them? Oh, you're going to vet them. You're going to go. You're going to see how they are. You want to see them in different environments. Just because you walk by my house and go, wow, your house is beautiful, I don't throw you the house keys. So it's like we also have to understand things come in stages. So if I look and say, you've been dating someone for 6 months and they haven't contacted you for 3 or 4 days, my first thing I'd suggest is get curious. Hey, I haven't heard from you in a few days. Is everything okay? That felt very different than our normal dynamic. Don't make assumptions. Don't come in well, you've been ignoring me for 3 days, because maybe that person's going through something and you also did not reach out to see if they're okay.
Absolutely. And sometimes too, I find that we get into these situations where we'll assume that somebody should be doing something without ever conveying that that's our expectation, or that that's where we are at in the relationship. And sometimes, I would find in more secure relationships where 2 people are more securely attached, when one person falls off, the other person would just say, hey, I'm at a place where I'm looking for a little more investment and consistency. Are you willing to show up in that way? And if the person is, then amazing. You just actually took the next step in the relationship. If the person doesn't, then you're still in that vetting stage of really getting to know the person and seeing, 100%. Well, is this person actually looking for the same things as myself? So I love that. I think that's such a powerful topic. And honestly, I really respect that you're talking about this from a different angle, because I do think that there's a lot of on the internet, and this isn't, to everybody listening, but just sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that like, everybody's the character in our story. And that's not how life works. It's like, oh, because I'm expecting this or needing this or wanting that connection, this person should be behaving in a certain way. And when they're not, it hurts me. But it's like, well, hold on a second. That person has their own individual life too. And part of coming into relationship is blending those two things together through vetting, through communication, through vulnerability. So can I ask you
communication?
Yeah.
Yes. I was going to even really quick, I can even share my partner, when we first met, I asked him for more texting. It's not like it's a bad thing. It's not like, oh my God, don't you dare. After 6 dates, I said, hey, can I share something with you? I'd love more communication in between our dates so I could feel more connected to you, because I feel like when I'm not, we have these amazing dates, we have great sex, and then I don't talk to you for 2 or 3 days. I don't feel like I'm as connected. And he came back to me, and to this day, it was the most beautiful boundary setting. And I just got a text, hey, hope you're having a great afternoon. I want to just be honest with you. This is not a sign of my disinterest. This is actually me just setting a boundary with you. I work in tech and I stare at a computer for 9 hours a day. Then when I'm done, all I have is a couple hours left to spend with my dog. The last thing I want to do is be on a mini computer in my hand. I'd much rather get to know you by calling you, spending time with you, and going out with you consistently. If that works for you, let me know. If not, I completely respect that.
That's beautiful. So your partner, was he securely attached when you met him?
More avoidant, working towards secure.
Okay. But willing to do the work.
Oh, he went to school for psychology. He worked at a therapist's office for 5 years working with people, and then realized that's not what he wanted to do. So he's been very cognizant of how this all works, but he thought I did it all. So then when we met, and he would always tell me, please call me on my shit. He's like, if you don't tell me, how am I going to know?
Yeah.
And always, hey, babe, I don't appreciate that. That was really dismissive and rude and disrespectful. Could you instead say this? And he'll be like, absolutely. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah. And that's I just want to go into that for somebody listening for a second, because it's funny. I feel like we had similar dynamics. When I met my husband as well, he was in a sort of similar space, and he's also in tech, and it's funny. So let's talk about that evolution for a second, because I think where a lot of the gap is of information in the world right now is we've got all these all your non-negotiables, be so intense about what you expect. And I think that that's not interdependent. That's almost counter-dependent. We're too extreme. But then we have the other version, which is just be okay with everything and people, please your way through life. And that's also the other extreme of codependency. So I would love, if you feel comfortable sharing, just what that looked like from you, and voicing that you needed more communication, more consistency, and how that actually evolved as a relationship. Because I think that would provide a great model for people who are how do we progress the texting into something more serious in a way that doesn't become codependent or counter-dependent?
Totally. And I think the biggest thing that we have to look at is the willingness of somebody to receive what you're saying and to work on their shit too. Because sure. And that's another thing that gets so hijacked on the internet is all avoidants are bad people. They all do. It's again, that black and white, as if anxious people should just get this free reign because we express ourselves. It's you don't express yourself. On the contrary, you project and deflect, but you're not actually saying, hey, I feel this because of this. This bothers me. Here's what I need. More often it's, well, you're ignoring me. Why didn't you call me?
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's the negative framing instead of the positive framing. You don't care. You don't spend enough time with me, instead of hey, I'm feeling disconnected. I'd love to spend more time together. Let's plan a fun date for the weekend. And it's and I get it. Anxious attachment styles are hurt when they're doing that. And there's that dynamic of them doing the best that they can. But I think that I agree with you that avoidance get a little bit too tough of a time. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. So back in the day, I was in client practice for about 10 years, and people come in, and I really didn't care what their attachment style was. I really didn't care how much trauma they had. Those were irrelevant factors to me. I was like, are you going to show up? Like,
Yep.
are you going to come in? Are you going to power through? Are you going to do the tough work? Are you going to be vulnerable? Are you going to open yourself up and be accountable if somebody calls you on your stuff? And like, that's what I would be looking for to think of, okay, am I going to be able to help these two people make a relationship a success?
100%.
So curious your thoughts about that as well.
100%. I mean, like, I'll give you an example, even very personal about my partner. So when we first met, he's very rigid, like I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning. I take my dog at 5. We go on a run until 6:15. I come back, I shower by 7 a.m. in front of my computer. At 10 on the dot, I have lunch. Like everything was that was his OCD and his way of control. He has his own shit. And I am not like that. I am very I love plans. Like I like to know, I'll see you on Friday. Great. We'll figure out what we'll do. Like, I don't need to know exactly what time. Not him. And so when we first started dating, I already knew his rigidity was going to be an issue. I just wanted to see how far it was going to go, right? So when we first started to date, he was very big on plans. And I'll be honest, that's what caused me to continue seeing him, was because when we first met, my dog had passed away 3 weeks before. I had just gotten out of a 2-monther kind of one of those early things with a guy that yeah, it was it wasn't anything. It wasn't serious enough to be oh, I need time to process this. It's no, I knew that this guy was avoidant. I knew he didn't want to talk about emotions and feelings. When my dog passed away, he was nowhere to be seen. He had no problem texting me good morning every morning, but wasn't there. And I just started to realize wow, what I thought I needed is not what I actually need. I need someone that's going to be there when I fucking need them, not just text me every morning.
Yeah.
And so I was coming into it in a very different mindset, but really the mindset was, I'm okay to lose this person if that's what that means. Because after you lose, when I lost my dog, who was for me my everything, he was my object of permanence, he was my life. And I used to joke and go, no, he has to live forever. But there wasn't a joke. It was literally I won't know what I'll do without him. And that was that moment that I was that's too much pressure on anything in my life to have. I cannot be that dependent on one thing surviving, and that's the only way I'll be okay. And so off the bat, I did not have fear when I would express myself to my partner, because I knew well, if I can't talk to you about simple issues, then we can't have a relationship. And so if I'm scared that you're going to run away, what am I losing? Let me open the door for you so that you'll get the fuck out of my way, so that you don't waste space for someone that has the bandwidth to give me what it is that I want and need. In conjunction with, do I believe I deserve that? Right? Let's have some fun with all of the core beliefs on top of it. And it got to a point where I wanted to just do okay, I know I'm going to see you on Tuesday. And I just, on a Thursday, I said, hey, do you want to go see a movie tonight? Spontaneous, right? Little something. And he was just met with no. And so I went to him and I said, hey, I called him and I said, hey, can I share something with you? And he was like, yeah, what's up? And I said, I got to be honest. I've mentioned this to you before, but your rigidity with the way that you make plans is really tough for me, because that's not how I am. And I'm not asking you to be completely loosey-goosey with me, but I am saying that I need a little bit more flexibility so that I can also feel more comfortable in this. And it doesn't feel like it's just revolving around your schedule, that you're also taking into consideration mine. And we talked about it. And he was like, you know what? You're right. I do think I should try being more spontaneous. And so now we have planned spontaneity. So sure, you know what? It's a bridge, right? That. And I'll take it.
No, I love that. Listen, one of the things that I really believe with all of my heart is that relationships are not just about love. I think they're also about growth.
Oh, no. 100%.
And I think love is a beautiful thing and it's a huge part of it. But I also think that there's growth there. And I think that you could almost see you have that spontaneity to you, and he's got this rigidity, you're saying, and you get to come together and actually work each other out of that zone a little bit and find that healthy medium. Or at least in this case, it sounds like he gets to break out of some of that really intense rigidity, which is a beautiful thing. And he gets to grow because he was willing to be accountable and show up for that, which is so cool. And that's
more than willing to as well. That's the thing. I've never forced him. He's the one that came to me to say, I need to go to therapy. I need to talk to somebody about issues. I would never. And I've mentioned to him, hey, I think it might be good to maybe start talking to somebody. I'm not going to force you to do that. But I've never been afraid to say, hey, I need this. When I used to go sleep over at 12 o'clock on the dot, you need to go. And finally I said, hey, can I share with you? It makes me feel very transactional. It feels like I'm at a brothel and our time is up and I have to leave. And I said, can I learn a little bit more? What do you need that time so rigidly for alone? And he then explained, he said, that's the only time I have to put my headphones on, listen to a podcast and do the stuff I need to do for prep. And so then again, we talked about it and I said, okay, how about we compromise? How about if I stay until 3, I'll take care of these things that you don't want to do while you do. I just want to be with you. And we did that slowly so that his nervous system didn't feel, so that at 3 o'clock, I would then look and go, it's time for me to go. And he would look and say, thank you. I appreciate that. Like, thank you for respecting me. I allowed him to push his, and I pushed myself to not take it personally and to not be like, you don't even want me here. You don't want me to stay. It's like, I don't know that I want to stay. I want to go home as well and get ready for the week. Like, I think it's about really understanding that, like, you're not going to get this perfect package. This person's not going to show up at your door, like all of those things. But do they have the desire and the flexibility? Do they have the bandwidth to work on it? Do they listen to you? Do you feel seen, heard, and understood? Do they make effort? Effort doesn't mean that they text you every fucking day at the exact same time. Effort means, are they calling? Are they FaceTiming? Are they sending you a meme in the day just to say, I'm thinking of you? Are they planning things for you? Are they showing? Are you having conversations of depth? Are you able to talk about, hey, how's your last relationship and what did it teach you about yourself? What are things you're no longer willing to accept in a relationship that you used to? I asked everything: first date, politics, race, religion. In my world, I said, why waste my time? If you don't agree with me, if you don't want to do this like this, you want to have 7 kids, I want none. Okay, then why are we going to go on more than one date? Because I was very clear on what are non-negotiables, meaning like, if you want to marry somebody of the same religion and I'm not that religion, nor am I willing to convert, okay, well, we need to talk about that, because then that means that we might not be compatible.
Yeah. You did maybe a little bit of the job interview date, but that's still good. You got it all out of the way. You get it in front of people, get to the bottom of it. It works out nicely.
Honestly, I had no worries about doing it, because in my world, I was like, I'm tired of wasting my energy and resources and finding out in 7 dates that this person has different political views than I do and is like diehard about them.
Okay, let me ask you a question. This is usually the rule of thumb I try to give people, which is like, hey, get the non-negotiables really clear ahead of time, know your standards, and then ask 2 questions per date, like 2 of the meaningful questions per date. That way it's not like too much of a job interview. I feel like you're a powerhouse and you'll like make it work. But for people who are like, maybe don't know how to present those questions as well as you do, or have a little bit less like emotional literacy, I feel like maybe a couple questions per date gives that patience and sort of the time to still vet, but have that like organic feel to the dating process.
Totally. And I think it's about being strategic about what you're asking, right? So if I say, hey, what are your political affiliations? Like, do you just, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a dissertation. Maybe if you say, I'm this, right? Whether it's a concern, I mean, we have 2 parties, right? So if you're conservative, you're Republican or Democrat, 6 of, I don't really give a shit, whatever your answer is. So then maybe then the answer could be, oh, totally. Okay. So if somebody says conservative, then I might go, oh my God, totally. Are you conservative because of religious reasons, or is it just like your own personal thing? Right there, I just answered a few questions in my head.
Love that.
Because if they say, oh, it's religion. Oh, you don't say. In my head, I'm just going, okay, well, that doesn't align with me. I don't do this and this and this. Great. I can get curious and like, oh yeah, well, has this been something that like have you been like that party for a long time? Totally. Hey, I respect everybody's opinions. I'm just curious. You can find out data without being like, what's your religion? Is this your? It can be in a casual, oh my God, can you believe what's happening in the world? How do you view that? Right? It could be something simple, or, oh my God, I got this the other day, right? It doesn't have to be so like, I'm going to interview, what's your answer? But we can listen to what people say.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really it, is like when you ask the question, listen to what they're saying and stop creating a narrative based on, oh my God, he's just really hot. Oh my God, did he just say he's this? Oh my God. So no. Get curious. Go just probe a little deeper of like, or, a question I love to ask on a first date is, what is a project or something that you're working on right now that you're really passionate about? Because the last time I did that, this guy tells you to tell me, I'm working on my first feature film. And I stopped and I was like, first feature film? I said, so do you have time? Like I said, so can you tell me more about that? He's like, yeah, I'm going to be traveling to Asia for 8 months. And I stopped and I was like, traveling for Asia? I was like, when does that happen? I was like, that's so exciting. Congrats. He's like, I'm leaving in a month and a half. And I said, so it doesn't sound like a relationship is something that you can fit on the table right now. And he was like, oh, well, we could do long distance. And I said, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Then the next day he texted me and he was like, you're fucking awesome. And he was like, thank you for asking me that. You're right. I realized I don't have the bandwidth for a relationship, but I didn't have to just go right and be like, do you want this? Yes or no? But I can ask, what are things that you're working on now that make you pass? Because then I can find out more about you and see if that works for me. Well, and so I think it's just about having curiosity and listening to what they say. And then just, oh, yeah, you don't say, Lloyd, tell me about this project you're working. Oh, where are you going to be? Because then you can just go, you know what? I don't think this is for me.
Perfect. I love that. And then you're vetting really effectively. So the summer is coming to a close, and now it's time to welcome in probably our much busier season. And if you're anything like me, the last place you probably want to be spending time is figuring out what to eat for dinner and standing in long grocery store lines. So you can make life easier with HelloFresh, which is America's #1 meal kit. With fresh ingredients and simple recipe cards delivered straight to your door, HelloFresh takes care of all of your meal planning, shopping, and meal prep. And I really can't express how much time HelloFresh has actually saved me each and every week. What I love most is the variety. So whether you're looking for fit and wholesome or quick and easy, vegetarian, or even family-friendly options, their ever-changing recipes keep food exciting when it comes to dinner and never leave me feeling like I'm making the same meals and just eating the same food over and over again. So if you're ready to save time and make cooking much more enjoyable for you and your loved ones, you can go for free breakfast for life at hellofresh.com/free Thais. That's THAIS. And you'll get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free Thais, THAIS. And now for a word from our sponsors. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that actually helps you find quality candidates fast. So you can ditch the busy work, and you can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging, which allows you to then connect with candidates much faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And one of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes all hiring in one place easy because you literally have the perfect match of candidates there. In fact, Indeed is something that we use all the time for hiring candidates at the personal development school, and I would feel a little bit lost without it, to be perfectly honest. When I was looking to hire somebody, it was originally slow and overwhelming until I decided to just go straight to Indeed, and that's when everything became a lot more simple. And it's still something that we use and will continue to use all the time. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences as well, so the more you use Indeed, the better it actually gets. So you can join 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will actually get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Thais. Just go to Indeed.com/Thais right now, and you can support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this particular podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/Thais. Terms and conditions may apply. Need to hire, you need Indeed. So can we go back for a moment as well to the text? So you went and you progressed your relationship. So I want to give people a model of like, they're in the dating stage and everybody talks about the dating stage and what to do wrong and what to do right. But I feel like there's this missing gap between like how to then actually progress a dynamic into the honeymoon stage or future stages of relationships. And I'm curious for you, as you were dating your partner, what you feel that you did in terms of showing up. And you give some really great examples, but were there other things where how did you enter into that conversation of, what is this or where are we going with this? And at what point did you do that? And just for anybody listening who's like in that gray mode themselves, what advice would you give to them?
So I am not the traditional. I met my partner on Hinge, like on a dating app. In my first, I was like, he's not really my type. But I was like, I'll give him a try. Like, why not? Like, he seemed nice enough. He wrote me a really nice thing. We had a nice little exchange. And I was like, okay, cool. There's definitely enough for me. And like, we went on a hike. I'm very active. So to me, I was like, hey, let's do something I was going to do anyways. It was like at my nephew, like there was like a baseball field. And I was like, perfect. There's like a little trail. We can like kind of walk around it and just get to know. There's so many people on the hike and, you're just kind of people watching and enjoying. And for me, it was like, and then like we hooked up on our first date and I left thinking I was never going to see him again. So I like to go against the grain. And I did in this regard because it's like, oh, there's so much clickbait. Don't you dare do a coffee date. No one's going to take you seriously. We did a hike date. And now this guy is looking for rings. Don't you dare sleep with a man on the first date. Well, we did. And that's honestly the reason that we had the only reason I even felt something was because he was physical with me. When he kissed me, I was like, oh, I didn't feel this. I was like, ooh, this is fun. Like, he's a really good. And I saw this passionate side of him that I was like, he didn't show. He's very reserved. He's just more stoic at first. You think he hates you. And it's like, no, he's just his resting bitch face. But I think like, for me, I was so like on the first date, I was very clear of like, hey, just because I say I want a relationship doesn't mean I want one with you. Like, I want to go slow. Going slow isn't an excuse for bad behavior. Like, I still want to make sure that we're getting to know each other and having conversations of depth, but I just don't want to rush the stages of a relationship quicker than they need to be. My partner asked me twice to be his girlfriend and I said no. And I clarified with, it's not that I don't like you. I don't know you well enough. I was like, I need to see more sides of you. I'm like, I'm very vulnerable. I'm very open. I'm very honest. And I don't feel like that's reciprocated. I was like, so I need to see more parts of you. But for me, like when we started to date, every date was, I'd love to see this person again. And if I don't, I don't. I released control to the outcome because I allowed naturalness to happen. I allowed us to miss each other because I wasn't so hyper-focused as why isn't he texting me and what's going on. I was living my own life. And every time, but you better believe, like, I was very clear, like after our first 2 dates, we went out. Third date, he invited me to, or I said, let me come over and make you dinner. I'm not very good at cooking, but I tried. Then he said, you know what, fourth date, let me make you dinner. And I was like, okay. And he's an incredible chef. And so for like 4 or 5 dates, it was just come over, I'll make dinner. And at first I was like, oh, it's not. And then after like a minute, I stopped him and I said, hey, I'm starting to feel like a hookup at this point, and I don't like this. I really want to be taken out and treated. And he stopped, and I remember him saying, oh my God, I can totally see how you feel. He was like, on the contrary, he was like, if I care about you, that's why I'm cooking for you. Because it was like a spectacle. He would do like a 3-course meal and the wine pair. Like this wasn't just come over, I'll order food and just sit on the couch with me. And I had to stop, and I was like, oh, that's how you're showing me love. You're cooking for me, acts of service. You're doing something. He would make me lunches for the next day so that I would have food because he knows I don't eat unless I, have it in front of me. And I really was just very clear every time I saw him to be very clear about how was I feeling. Like when I would be with him, I'd say like, hey, I'm really enjoying my time with you. This has been really lovely. Like, how are you feeling? And he would say like, I feel really connected to you. I'm really jiving. I enjoy this. And I'd be like, awesome. Well, let's keep doing it. And then about a month in, he looked at me and he said, I'm not saying I need you to do this, but I just want to tell you I'm ready to delete my apps. I really like you and I only want to focus on you. And I just want to let you know where I'm at. And I said, cool. I feel the same. I'm ready to delete the apps. I was like, but I'm not ready to be in a relationship with you. And he said, okay, can you go on about what that means? And I expressed, I'm not ready to meet your friends and family. I'm not ready for it to be we. I want to make sure that this is something I enter because you and I are truly compatible, not just because you're there. And he was like, okay, fair.
That. So I hear the biggest things are like transparency. I really hear, and they're very transparent. I totally hear advocating for your needs. I hear both of you super accountable, which is amazing, and both being really willing and open to take feedback.
Oh, yeah.
And I hear this big part of like being very individuated. Like you're living your life. You're not living from the outside in, basing your self-esteem and how you're feeling about yourself from the relationship. And I mean, this is obvious to you, like, this, but, to anybody listening, like, I think there's so many beautiful takeaways from you sharing that in your story, which is like somebody who really knows who they are, what they're looking for, what they're wanting, and not afraid to really advocate for that. And I really do feel like there's this big missing part where everybody talks about dating, but like, what about when we evolve through dating? What are those necessary key ingredients? And I think there's so many in there just from hearing your story that are shared beautifully, and that willingness to take feedback and clarify and get that information. So fantastic. That's a beautiful share. And if you had to go into the next part of this, so the communication piece, did you see, when you went into like a more of a power struggle stage in the relationship, or we have those natural times where things get more serious, what were some key takeaways that you found during that period of time in your communication that really worked?
Honestly, we just consistently, to this day, like we're in couples therapy now because we're talking about marriage, and not for a bad thing. We both want to make sure what are the issues that we have and can we rectify them? Can we move past this? Can we communicate? And it's been a game changer for us because we're now understanding each other. He's opened up in ways I never knew these things about him. But I think when it came to like that kind of that transition, it was very much, it went from a me to a we. And I really had to understand it's not just about me anymore. Sure, I can express myself and I can tell you how I feel, but I also needed to make space for him to share how he felt.
Yeah.
And I also had to encourage that because he's more avoidant. And to now where he'll say, like, he'll come to me now and he'll say, okay, babe, I know that I need to do this because it's for the health of our relationship. And I want to preface how much I hate doing this right now, but I'd like to talk to you about how I feel. And I'll be like, okay, talk to me. Because we make sure, I always ask for consent. Hey, can I share something with you? I wait for him to tell me that he's in a headspace to receive it so that if he tells me, can you give me 5 minutes? Absolutely. Let me know when you're free.
Yeah.
I want to respect both of us because as we were forming this relationship and you're scared, like I'm scared, God, and like I was honest with him. I said, I asked him, I said, do you have any fears or trepidations about getting into a relationship with me? And he told me his, and I said, can I share with you mine? And I said, I'm very scared that once you really get to know me with my anxiety, you're going to leave me. And I was honest about that. And I said, but let me share with you, that's not your problem. I'm in therapy and I'm working through this, but that's my fear. That's what I battle with every day of being scared to lose you. And he then came back and, it's just, I think
there's a vulnerability.
It's a vulnerability of like, I'm not scared to lose. Like, here's the reality. When I was a child, yeah, I was scared that my father was going to walk out on me because I was too much or I was going to be this. But this isn't my father. I'm not dating my father. I get to make a choice and I have agency now as an adult. I get to decide if this works for me or not. And I get to also say, I wasn't afraid of losing him. Because if you're so afraid of losing him, then what do you actually have, right? You're just scared of the abandonment. I'm not getting abandoned. Who is this guy? Abandonment would mean that I would be unsafe. I'm not unsafe. I'm fine. I'm okay. I can go on with my life. And I think that empowerment allowed me to be able to come. But honestly, before I would go to him with issues, I took stock of it myself.
Yeah.
I would first wait a minute, what's going on? And what I also realized was like in the moments, like I'll never forget, his friend had a birthday party and it was the first time I was meeting like a bulk of friends. And I have anxiety with social gatherings. Too many people get me overwhelmed. It's too much small talk. And I literally had a meltdown. I was at his house. I was unpacking the car and I cried and I was like, I need you. And I just lost it in the car and he just held me. That was the first time I had ever had like a breakdown. And he held me and he said, I'm okay with whatever you want to do. I support you. If you want to go home, I'll pack the bag right up and let's get you home. And he said, otherwise, I really want you there. And I want you to know that at any point, I'll Uber you back home if you want to get out of this. And we talked about it and I went in and then we had the best fucking time. That was the night I told him I loved him. Like it was such a beautiful night because we went through adversity together. And I realized when that person, I needed to be vulnerable to share. I'm fucking scared and I'm freaking out right now and I don't know what to do because that allowed me to go, oh, wow, I feel really safe with this person. That's what I've been missing.
And you get to see that he's there. And it's interesting because you shared at the beginning that when your dog died and how that person in the situationship for 2 months wasn't there. It sounds like your partner now is the exact opposite. And you get to really see that firsthand, which is so cool. So what do you have in terms of advice for somebody who goes through, and I'm not sure if you've experienced this before, but I think this is definitely like a fearful avoidant thing in the past or dismissive avoidance. And you do such an amazing job of clearly communicating your needs. But I know there's a lot of people probably listening who are like, it is terrifying to do that. It is terrifying to be like, hey, I need you, or hey, I like need some support in this particular case. Do you have any advice for somebody like that who's listening?
Totally. My first question would be, okay, let's bring out the fears. What's so scary? We're like, what are we so scared of happening, right? So if I'm scared of saying something, I'm scared I'm going to lose you. Okay, so it's like, okay, so if I'm scared I'm going to lose you, then what am I holding on so tight to? So that would be my first thing is like, well, what are we scared of? Then the second thing is like, we now also have to say, okay, how old do I feel, right? Like, do I feel like a child? Because yeah, when I was a kid, I was terrified to say something to my father because he would hit me or he'd walk out. So then I have to go, wait a minute, I'm now an adult. I'm 34 currently. I am a 30-something-year-old woman in my body, and this feels like I'm a 6-year-old saying this. Okay, well, can I validate and give myself permission to have needs? Because growing up, I never was. I always had to blame and shame, and it was always like, you're too much, and you're too needy, and you're too much for dad. That's why he keeps leaving. No, it was that my father's emotionally unavailable and can't handle other people's issues because he doesn't know what to do with them. And so I had to validate myself and say, well, Sabrina, you have every right to feel this. You have every right to be sad. You have every right to be bummed because you're a human and that's okay. And I think it's about, one, honoring, I'm terrified to say this to you. That's okay. Start with that. I'm fucking, like my partner will come and say, I hate doing this. I really don't want to be emotional, but I think I need to tell you this. Start with, I'm freaking out right now. I am so scared to say this. It's okay to acknowledge and give yourself the validation and give yourself the opportunity to say, I think I'm scared or something's coming up for me, right? Then we have to validate and go, okay, well, let me ask a question. If I self-abandon, is that scarier than me just losing this person, right? Like if I walk away from what my needs are to make sure the other person's satisfied, are my needs ever going to be met? Because then who's going to take care of me?
Absolutely.
And so it's really just challenging that of like, I totally understand that you're scared. I get it. It is really scary, but what's so scary about it?
And honestly, what I would see over and over again when people would finally do this, like in client practice is, and even in our programs, is like people will come in, they'll be terrified to communicate their needs. And then they'll get into a place where after they have, it's like, oh, if you communicate vulnerably, it's so much easier. Like the vast majority of the time, it's actually going to go really well. And if it doesn't, when you're communicating to somebody in a vulnerable moment, in a vulnerable, kind way, then that person's not for you. Like if that's somebody and they can't, they're like, oh, too bad, who cares? And they stomp all over it. And you know, you see that, then that's part of the vetting process. You know, that's part of, I have this memory of, so I've been with my husband now coming up on 10 years. And I have this vivid memory of being in a situation with him where I communicated my needs for the first time, like 9.5 years ago. And I'd done so much internal work first, but then we got into a point where it was like that external work. And we had that conversation. I shared about a need that I had. And I remember what I was wearing. It was so vivid and so scary for me, having been fearful avoidant. But as you work through that, that's so much of what really moves the needle.
100%. It is terrifying. Like the first time we ever, like I remember even the first time I was like, oh my God, but I'm going to lose it. And it's like, yeah, it is scary. But so is the first time that I drove. And so is the first time that I do a lot of things. Like, so is the first time I ever made a video on TikTok. It's like fear can either cripple us or propel us. You get to choose you get to choose. That's the beauty. You have agency as to how much this is going to impact you. And it's like, do you want to wake up in 20 years and be like, man, fear took over? It's like, or do we want to face that fear? Because usually what happens is like, it's this tiny mountain or molehill that becomes a mountain just because it's a shadow. Because it's that shadow part, right? There's a little girl that's terrified, but then when we can face her and hold her and tell her, girl, boy, whatever, when we can face them and let them know, like, I'm here for you, I'm validating you, I'm holding space for you. And I know that this is scary, but I have your back. It's like, well, then again, what are you so scared of losing?
Yeah. Beautifully said. So I love how much you shared today. I think you did such a beautiful job of diving into such important topics, but also of sharing just that context of your story and the big key parts that people can take from. I think it's always nicer to hear through people's real life experiences than anything else. So thank you for sharing everything that you did. And tell us about what you have coming up next, what's going on for you, and where everybody can learn more about you and what you're doing.
Thank you. And I can't wait to have you on the podcast because we're going to have a real good chat. So you can find me at Do the Work Podcast for now. That's the name of this. It's called Do the Work Podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever podcasts are found, Instagram and YouTube, and then Sabrina.Zohar on Instagram and TikTok. And the new foundation course came out. So that's really just been my love and my joy is like really, if you struggle with dating, you're struggling with your patterns and your core beliefs and limiting beliefs in childhood and all of those things. It's like, we got an 8-week course that's really designed to like help you get in there so that by the time you're done, you have a clear and very solid understanding of what it is that you want, what it is that you need, and where it is that you're going to go. Because I'm tired of people claiming, oh, after this, you'll find your partner. It's like, I'm not God. My crystal ball is in the shop. But what I can prep you is to come home to yourself. And to me, that's my number one goal is like, if I can come home to me, then I can take on the world.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Beautifully said. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun and looking forward to chatting again soon.
Likewise.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth, and thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.